All right, guys, we're live. Are you guys seeing the stream out there? My Discord's always a little laggy, so I'm seeing everything frozen, but I'll go back to the other one. Everybody else seeing things good?
I am.
Yeah, great. All right. Welcome everybody. It's been a few weeks since we've been here. We got a really fun town hall for everybody tonight. So thanks for being with us. We've if you guys remember a few weeks back, we did a really fun segment with a few of the gentlemen who helped design what you played mostly back in the day for Overpower, Ron Peraza and Steve Domzalski. But a lot of people also were interested in hearing from the two gentlemen that you'll see here below us on the screen, the Stern brothers, who are basically the inventors of Overpower. I'll say what I think I know, and then we're really excited to chat with you guys and kind of hear the real history of how it went. But yeah, you guys have always been credited as the gentleman that invented the game that ended up becoming the full Overpower that we bought from Fleer. So thanks very much. So we have Michael Stern and Theo Stern with us for this town hall tonight.
Everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. With us tonight is Keith Bursack, who you know, one of the founders of the original BMG, now Lazarus Rising Games. Keith is one of the gentlemen who originally worked at Fleer with Ron and Steve, helped found Lazarus Rising Games with us. Nice to see you again, Keith, as always. Sean Sawyer is with us. Sean Sawyer was our creative director for the Edgar Rice Burroughs and the World Legends set for everything art-wise. And he is now the project manager on the Top Cow set. Keith is a project manager on an IP that we haven't announced yet, but we do have a big announcement, so you're going to hear it right here now. We actually signed the contract, so we are working on how we're going to roll out the big announcement for everybody. But we've got a very huge IP that we're about to announce that you guys are going to be real excited about. We're super excited. We've been negotiating it for a long time. I know we've been teasing it out for over a year. So the good news is the set's actually been in design for over a year because we just did the work assuming that the contract was going to work out, and luckily it all did. So fantastic. So that was our big announcement for tonight, and we haven't figured out exactly how we're rolling it out in conjunction with the company that we've licensed from, but we're figuring all that out this week, and there's going to be some big announcements soon. Other bookkeeping stuff before we jump in with the Stern brothers. We're definitely going to be making a lot of appearances at cons this year. So we're going to have a huge presence in Origins. So we've already got a booth where we've sponsored some stuff at the bar. So if you're going to be back at I think it's the Hyatt bar, you'll see a bunch of Overpower stuff there. There's going to be Overpower ads. There's going to be Overpower stuff at the hotel everywhere for you guys to see. So we're going to have a big presence at that. I believe we're going to be at most of the PAX. Pretty much any conventions after mid-April, once we fulfill, we're planning on having a presence at, with the exception of Gen Con. We might not be able to do. The wait list on that's pretty big, but we're still trying to get in there. So that's kind of the update with what's going on. If you're listening and you haven't filled out your surveys yet for the Kickstarter, please go on and finish that. The survey period is going to be closing soon, and we want to make sure you guys don't have any delays in getting all the product that you bought off the Kickstarter. And with that said, guys, usually this is actually, for anybody watching, we haven't met before. We didn't do any pre-interviews or anything. So this is also, we're all kind of, the three of us are, well, I don't know about you, Keith, if you've ever met these gentlemen before, but for Sean and I believe this is the first time we've met you. So
I think Keith and I have met.
Okay.
Long
Fantastic.
time ago. I don't know if Keith remembers.
I'm still muted.
No, I can hear you, Keith.
We
Oh,
can
you
hear
can? It says muted by host, but you can hear me?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have you on the Discord audio.
Oh, okay, perfect then. Yes, yeah, no, we did meet much. I know we're Facebook friends, and we did meet once, I believe, in the Fleer offices in Mount Laurel.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I think the coolest thing, I don't know, anybody else can jump in if they want, but I think the coolest thing would be to hear from the two of you. You know, we know everything from talking to Ron and Steve kind of once they decided to start designing the first couple of sets. But I'd love to hear just, where did Overpower come from? So you guys, what's the story of you guys actually creating and then selling the idea to Fleer?
Well, that's not exactly how I remember it.
Well, good. It was, how did it
Yeah,
work?
I mean, again, and Theo, feel free to jump in, but and my memory may be hazy because this was a long time ago, but for me, it goes back to I was already working in role playing games. I worked for a company called West End Games, who famously had the Star Wars, the role playing game, Ghostbusters, all sorts of great stuff. They had a great game called Torg, which was like a multi genre game, which really, I think, influenced the creation of OverPower quite a bit. But the way I remember it was I was living in central New Jersey, and Fleer was in central New Jersey, in Mount Laurel, and just sort of becoming aware that they were looking for a game designer in the area. And as I recall, they just came in and said,
Did
"We
I
want to
freeze
try."
or did he freeze? Oh,
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 sorry.
yeah,
Keep
yeah.
going.
Yeah, I just recall them calling me in and saying, "Hey, wonderful. We have a game designer right here. Can you pitch us something for this? This is what we're looking for. We want to do a game." Magic was huge. That sent seismic shockwaves through the role playing game industry. All of a sudden, everyone was doing collectible card games. That was definitely something that I had thought about getting into. So this was a great start, and I said, "Sure, I'll come back and pitch something." And I knew right away I needed to get Theo involved because I'm sort of a story guy. Storytelling is my end of it, and what I did mostly at West End Games was all of that. Backstories and what are the stories of all the characters and how's this all going to work. Theo is more of the rules maven and the guy with the algorithms. So and we had created games together as kids and things like that. So I brought him in. We sort of came up with after listening to Fleer, what they wanted, we came up with our approach to it, which was not an easy thing to do because it's a world and there's a test deck right there that Theo's holding up.
And Theo, what
But
is it? What does it say on it? It's
It says Power Players,
okay.
Power Players Demo Pack, and there was originally two, A and B.
Okay.
Um, in a minute I'll go through some and tell you which heroes are in them, but we can do that a little bit later. So
yeah, I mean, so that's basically the machinations of how it happened. And then, sort of having to solve this really difficult problem of, we wanted to create a game where everybody's favorite character would be fun to play. So, how do you do a game where like there's a fight between Jubilee and Magneto and it doesn't end in 2 seconds? So
Yep.
I sort of went back and said, we have to look at our role-playing game, Torg, that we had done and how we had, in the development of that, we had these same conversations, how could we have a fight, but what are the unique characteristics of your favorite character and how to make them the most fun and make that such a part of the game that you could challenge anybody. And so we came up with this concept of the city street because that was so Marvel. That was such a classic Marvel thing to do, fights on the city streets. And because they, unlike DC, they had the real New York City, and we just thought this was a great place to start. So, we just started putting together, and we came in, and as I recall, Keith, we came in and pitched it to Fleer, to Steve, and they loved it and hired us to create the game.
yeah, originally we had a lot of mechanics that I know Steve mentioned this that they stripped out. So we had object cards like phone booth, city bus, building, and we actually had movement for the actual heroes. So a hero could fly up on top of a building or climb a tree, and then if a hero went up a tree, and another hero wanted to attack them, they either had to have a ranged attack or go up the tree, right? And at the time, Bill Jamis, who was the president of Fleer Trading Cards, thought that was too complicated, which really makes me laugh now because the game is so much more complicated
Oh
now
yeah.
than what we pitched to him. I mean, way more complicated now than what we pitched to him. But he thought the whole idea of having movement and range was too complicated for young kids. His phrase to us was, I want you guys to design a game that we can teach a 10-year-old to play in 10 minutes with the complexity of chess. Literally,
That's
that's
great.
that's an exact quote from him. Um, and so a lot of the original ideas, the specials were all our idea. The way we were going to kind of achieve what Mike mentioned, where you were going to be able to have something that made Jubilee, right? But uh, uh, ultimately, Fleer ended up moving a lot of those capabilities, like movement, into the specials. I actually liked it as part of the actual character card because I thought it added a lot to the strategy. Where you could kind of design your deck and have your object cards support whatever the actual whatever your particular heroes were good at, right?
Right,
So
right.
if you were playing Hulk or Thing, you'd stack your deck with a lot of cards of things they could pick up and hit somebody with. Whereas if you were playing Spider-Man, you'd stack your deck with cards that
They could
allowed him
climb.
to climb up or right. And we really liked that concept. Ultimately, Bill didn't like it, so it got stripped out. Bill wanted a poker mechanic. He was a big poker fan, and that's where the venturing came from. And I'll say the game that ended up getting produced is a lot of fun and does have a lot of strategy. I do think the game that my brother and I made more kind of captured the feel of superheroes battling on a New York street.
It's interesting. So clearly, the objects were what became basic universe cards, which is much more
Right.
simplified. They're just a numerical boost to an attack or a defense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll show you. Here's a mailbox. Let's see if hopefully you'll be able to see the text on it.
Okay. And I can't read the stats though. So read to us. So I see mailbox. What are those different stats that are on there?
So we have brute force 4. That's what it would take to be able to pick it up and use it to hit somebody with it. Jump climb 1. So a mailbox is easy to jump up and climb on top of. It had an attack value of 5. So if you picked it up and hit with it, it was a 5. And it had a defense of 5 if you used it as a shield.
As a shield.
Yeah.
That's very
And
cool.
then,
I like that a lot. So I
yeah.
believe I have. So some of the people have gotten their hands on some of these decks and been generous enough to donate them for tournament prizes for our league. So I believe this. Tell me if I'm right. Is this one of your original heroes?
N-
Doesn't look like it.
no.
Mm-mm.
No.
Original.
So
That's the real
Well, now I
catching.
gotta find out what these ones
Mhm.
are. I
Yeah.
thought I was all gonna be the cool kid that had got my hands
So,
on one.
so I can arrange to get a couple of these
So
decks in
that's
your
a
name.
Captain America. Okay.
Yeah.
And there's more to it.
I have a whole bin full of these playtest
Mhm.
decks. So I can get some playtest decks into your hand. In fact, one of your fans that you and I spoke about originally was going to have me come to a comic book convention in Orlando where I live, and I was going to bring some of these to give away as prizes to people, and even maybe play a couple. And then this is the actual. Mike wrote the rule book for it. You can't really see. It's just a little
Oh, I
folder.
see. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
Mhm.
and so it was a fun game. And like I said, it's still playable. I actually haven't played it in a really long time. Somebody again, I'm trying to remember his name. One of your fans who's actually one of your better players who's won some of your championships. So you can throw some names at me.
Was it one
Phil
of
Not
the?
the
Phil
Or-
Keffer, Marcel
Phil
Leger.
Keffer. Phil
I was gonna
Keffer
say.
came. Phil Keffer came to my house
Oh,
and
okay.
actually, I gave him some playtest cards, and I actually played a game of Power Players with him. I beat him. Um, and then my girlfriend made this box for me.
Oh,
She
that's great.
actually, when my brother and I were first starting to kind of conceptualize the game, my girlfriend wrote us up just a ton of like index cards for us to play with. That was literally our first playtest cards. I don't have those anymore. But what you'll see is a lot of the original playtest cards didn't have art yet, and they were very square cornered.
Okay, all right. I see, and they're starting to evolve to more like what was originally released.
And then some had art, but were square cornered.
Okay. Yep. Yeah,
I
that's
have
the first
yeah,
Cyclops piece.
I have a whole bunch of these,
Wow.
right? All the different heroes. I can show you like what some of the first universe cards looked like.
Very nice.
And then also some of the first like teamwork cards. So this is a very early teamwork card that we came up with these as well.
So what
Looking
is
at it,
yeah, so the stats on the top, what does it actually read?
It says 5 to use, 5 attack, +3 to teammate.
Interesting.
5 fighting to use, 5 fighting attack, +3 strength to teammate.
Okay,
So the
interesting.
early ones would act as an attack and then would add to a teammate.
To their attack?
Yes.
That's funny. It's funny that it's less than 6. That's you guys have probably heard if you've watched any of our town halls about the new set. We've reduced the attack value to 4 from 6. Just as we've found with all the testing, they were a kind of a problem in the old set as far as like most of the deck was built around doing that and then throwing 2 follow-up attacks that had huge bonuses. So
Yeah.
we've dialed that power level down. So it's interesting that originally they were 5s. They were less than the 6. And
Yeah.
it sounds like just 1 follow-up from 1 teammate, not the 2 that they ended up.
Yeah. We had all different variations of it. So honestly, I don't remember. But when you look at when I look at one of the heroes, so Iron Man had combat energy repulsive ray, attack 6, defense 7. So his attack and defense were not the same.
So
Which
he
I
could use, yeah, that's interesting. We
yeah,
talked a lot about that at one point too. We didn't end up doing it, but there was some discussion early on if we should give people a 5th stat that would have just been defense. That was something that got brought up early on. It didn't end up materializing. It was, I think, a little too much of a departure from what people knew as original Overpower. And it's really
yeah,
important for us to make sure that what we're doing feels like Overpower. I think Ron
right.
actually said it too. It feels like this feels like the next step if you were to just put more sets out and it would have continued past '01. And that
That makes
seemed
sense.
like a little bit, but there's, we've had the same thoughts where it's like, well, a character like Invisible Woman who's making so many force fields like should have a huge defense compared to like just offensive brute force generally isn't as high.
The other
well, and
thing
to be
I
honest, I
think
mean,
this go ahead, Mike.
I'm just saying, to be honest, like the original versions, even before we came to Fleer, when we were working it out amongst ourselves, I think the idea that we had was to try to have even more characteristics for everybody. So there were, we probably our original version was, we kept having what Bill Jameis had said in our heads come back, and we had to simplify and simplify all the time. But in terms of making it a simulation of what these heroes can do well, exactly what you're saying, we took a long look at the entire roster to make sure we were encompassing everything that every Marvel character, and at least the main ones, could do. So that it didn't work out that way. In the end, it got so simplified that it sort of got away from that. It became a little bit more genericized. So it wasn't quite as good a reflection of how Invisible Woman, for example, would work and why she would be great to have in your deck. But we were hoping to make up for that with the specials. That was kind of the way to make up for the fact that you only had a certain amount of characteristics that you could work with.
And even here, I mean, I think so. So we had combat, energy, hand to hand, and brute force, and then we had movement, jump, climb, and fly. And every hero had those stats at some rating. But the other thing that was a little different that I don't think carried to the game is um, Iron Man, for example, has a toughness of 6. Spider-Man has a toughness of 3, and that's how many hits it took to knock the character out. And I think it went to the same for everybody, right? Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
everybody's
Yeah.
20
For
points of
everybody?
numerical damage or 3
Oh, that's right.
icons.
Yeah,
Without a modifier, yeah. Which
yeah,
again I think is like I think everybody's always sort of felt the same way of like, you play Superman, the KO threshold should be a little bit different than Jubilee is the person
yeah.
we keep picking on. And again, that's other conversations we've had too about, should we try to develop different thresholds for KO? I think what ended up getting developed later with the inherent abilities has been a nice way for us to kind of address that in certain characters. You know, give them maybe a higher ability to use certain power cards defensively, even if their base stat doesn't have it, or give them an ability to be harder to KO. Uh, which is, you know, that gives it more flavor. I think we're to the point where more than half our characters tend to have some kind of inherent ability, because it just gives you, it kind of gives that same flavor. I think that you guys, sounds like what you guys were trying to do with your original game as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we really wanted to embrace what made the characters and embrace the feel of, that you would see. And when you're watching your, Sunday morning Marvel cartoons of the characters really duking it out on a city street.
And I think if we were to make it again today, if we were to to start all over again, and if we were aiming for a grown-up audience and not a kid audience, it would be entirely different. And all of that detail, I'm sure, would have been back in there, but that was not, Bill's mission, I think, so I think it was,
Well, it's interesting that it developed, though, because if you look back at the original set, and honestly, it was one of the problems as the game went on. When this game's being published, 95 to 2001, it was still the idea was still, well, we can't just tell people that their old cards are useless, because the
Right.
community is going to revolt. They won't want to buy the game anymore. Now it's common, there's different formats and cards age to older formats, and people understand that you want to keep a certain formats with a fresh meta and with a more limited card pool. So that's more accepted, but you got one of the problems with the original set is some of the really iconic characters got introduced in those earlier sets, and then later sets, when the game did develop it was obvious it was skewing a little older than I think they anticipated originally, and they started to introduce more complicated mechanics and better mechanics. They ended up being on characters that had a new comic, like Spider-Girl, or not the one
Heroes
from the
for
future.
Hire, Starjammers.
Heroes for Hire, Starjammers. And so a lot of times you go back and it's like Wolverine is pretty hard to play in a tournament deck, and that's kind of a bummer. So I think,
Spider-Man's impossible.
Yeah, it's
I don't know, Joe
not
Peters had that one
impossible.
deck.
Well, almost impossible.
But then also, Keith, about what you're saying is totally right. When somebody finds a way to use them, we just had a player use the Galactus promo hero and won the Boston tournament. Andrew Taylor, shout out to you. And that was a character that until this tournament was kind of a novelty, and everybody, if you remember that promo hero, if you guys were still following, in the one of the first set or two, he just had 3/8 and no specials, and it was, no one really used him because he was so expensive. But Andrew figured out a great teamwork deck with him and actually won the biggest tournament we've had. Would we have 47 players? There's
Yeah.
some
That's
insane
great.
number of players. And that's great. That's I think, to build on what you were saying, Michael, it's such a great feeling when someone takes a great character and figures out a way to use them in the game. And, as us as designers, and I'm sure with you, that's kind of our primary approach to everything, is we want to make sure if you like a character, you're going to be able to go out there. Like if you're a John Carter of Mars fan, I think you're going to love the way John Carter plays. He has cards that represent his jumping ability, his stamina, he's got a kind of an immortality card to kind of represent when he goes between the two planets that has a healing effect. And so I think it's fun listening to you guys talk, because I think it's very bookended. Like you guys were at the beginning, and then it sort of turned into something a little different based on the corporate direction.
Very
And then
different.
very different. And it seems like a lot of what we're getting back to has these same elements. Because what you're talking about, Theo, with the way the different items worked, we are introducing advanced universe cards in the first set, and then those are turning into sort of what you're talking about, where we're not introducing a lot of those, but in the later sets, we're talking about things where instead of it just being a dumpster gives you +3 to an attack, maybe a dumpster makes a character not able to hit for the turn if that attack's successful. Like it does a stun effect, or it does, a knockback effect if it's a lamppost, and maybe knocks the guy into reserve if you play it with an attack. So these are none of these, guys, if you're in the audience and you don't ever see that card, you can't hold it against us. We're still ideating, to use the corporate word. But it's interesting hearing it, because we're going back to where you started, being like, well, we want something that's strategically rich that does this, and basic universes are kind of basic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think to be fair to Fleer also, like it makes perfect sense that they didn't really understand who the audience was going to be yet. Like they had an assumption going in, this is you would know more about it than I would, Keith, but this is a sports card company.
Yeah.
They're phenomenal at presenting baseball cards and things like that, and their audience did skew fairly young for those, to a degree. And they felt like they had an idea of what the audience was. And I think probably, that idea evolved eventually. What they were great at, to give Fleer a ton of credit for this, was the art that they brought in was phenomenal. The artists that they brought in to do it, the way that they could create and present the cards themselves. When we first saw, even what they did to the art that they put on those little decks that we made, those playtest decks of power players, was so good. We were like, we thought that was what it was going to be. And then when we saw what they did when it became Overpower with the real art, our minds were completely blown. So,
oh yeah, that's very cool.
yeah, that was their absolute specialty, and I think the biggest, tremendous boon for having
Yeah.
Fleer do it is because you guys, they really knew what they were doing visually, and they did not skimp on hiring artists, and they knew that these had to be collectible. I remember this going around in the meeting rooms, like not only does it have to be playable, but people are going to want to collect these for the art alone. We're going to use known artists, and so I have to give them a lot of credit for that, for sure. So if seems like we're trying to say that, oh, we created this amazing thing and all they did was, simplify it and take out all the great things. That happens. I work in Hollywood now. That's a thing that happens. And people give you notes and you roll with the notes. And, but it's, to their credit, I don't think it would have had the success without it being coming from a company that really knew how to present gorgeous cards.
The first season of tournaments, so for the first year before the first expansion came out, Fleer hired me to go around and do tournaments. Keith, I may have played you at the first tournament as
Really?
a sample for people. I think. Did you come from the Magic side of things? Maybe
I
I'm
did play
thinking of-
Magic before playing Overpower.
No, this was somebody who was real big in the Magic circles.
Yeah, that definitely
Um,
wasn't me.
They brought somebody in with me in the first. We went to the
Was that maybe Gabe Alonso?
Gabe, yeah.
Yeah, he's the one who got me introduced, and he's the one who they brought in, sort of like pound the pavement and like talk the game up in stores. So yeah, it was Gabe Alonso.
So they had Gabe and I play each other at like in front of everybody at the first convention, and I beat him. And I didn't really know the new game very well, and I bluffed him so bad, and then I explained to everybody how you could bluff, but it was fun. We had I have a picture of me and Wolverine holding up this giant $5,000 check for the winner of the tournament together, and they paid me to go to conventions for a year, and kids would come up and ask me to sign their Spider-Man cards, and
That's
it was
great.
a fun time of my life. I'll say too, it's funny to hear you say Spider-Man's not playable because he was like one of the best players in the first edition. In the
Yeah,
first
he
run,
was one of
everybody
the
wanted Spider-Man.
I think what ended up happening with that, and you can tell by the way, you have what we call the threat count now, and you would add up the character stats, and you could have up to 70. What was it in the original set, Keith, with the three?
19, I think was
Yeah.
was the highest. There were a bunch of like 766s.
Yeah. And so then with the 4 stat, you could have like 76 total. But yeah, it was Spider-Man, Iron Man, Venom, and Doctor Doom were the ones that had a 7, a 6, and a 6, which meant
Yeah.
they could do all the teamworks and they were really strong. And then as the special cards got more in depth and more powerful, the stats became way less of a big deal. And they would put more characters out who had 2 7 stats following the DC one, but it had really low other stats. So sometimes you could get a double 7 that was only 17 or 18 points when you added it up.
So, do you find? I'll ask you a question now. Do you find that everybody's playing the same heroes over and over again?
So it's a great question. So when we started this tournament circuit back up, a couple of gentlemen, Jack Trong and Sean Ballantyne, they did a Canadian tournament, and this was, I want to say, in 2010. So no one had really played in a while, and they were like, let's just hold an event. And they got 10 players, and I don't think they even realized it, but that one event, they at the time they didn't ended up sparking like, well, this was really fun. We got to do it again. And then within a year, people at different locations that had groups started doing it. And fast forward about 5 years when our other founder, Dave McMillan, who wasn't able to make the call, and I were joining this league, we came in and there were 4 events already that people were holding. But it was just sort of when people had the time or felt like having it. And the events themselves were great, but we sort of had the vision to say, all right, let's start. We called it the OverPower Alliance. And we said, let's make sure we're all using the same cards. We're all using the same set of rules. Everything's uniform, and let's run this like a circuit. And after that, the events just started to add on and take off. Some people, the Kefers used to run a great event. They ended up having to, they stepped back from that and then started running a Baltimore one. But it got to the point now where we run 6 events. We stream the matches. We've got, I don't even know, 1,000 people that watch them online. But it's sort of all built from that coming back, so.
So are there like heroes, like it sounds
Yeah.
like heroes that never get used in tournament?
So
Yeah.
when it started back up, everybody figured out sort of the energy decks had gotten most of the characters that could just defend the whole team. And so the energy deck was really oppressive. There was, 4 specific characters that you tended to see the most. When they were on a deck together, they called it either the Cadillac or the Ferrari because the deck drives itself. But that's really what the work we did when we started to make cards. So we initially started just making some fan sets that the whole community designed as a project so that everybody would accept it. And those mechanics that we introduced took it from where you would see in the ballpark of 18 to 20 characters out of the 200 plus characters would see play. And then once we created some more cards, we saw that branch out to, I don't know, about 40 characters. And then that's really what we focused on, is ways to take older mechanics that weren't as powerful but existed on characters and introduce new cards to make those playable. So for example, we started to create home bases that instead of listing the characters on them, like happened in the later sets, they would take a mechanic. So we had one called, it's now called 221 Baker Street after Sherlock Holmes' apartment. It's in the new set. But it says whenever you play a card that lets you look at a card from a character's hand or their deck, you can choose one to discard. So before, you would play a character like Xavier, and he's got his telepathy to look at cards in their hand, and you'd look at them, and then they would just kill you with the cards that you looked at. So it was a terrible mechanic. Now you can actually discard one and keep card parity. So we've had the advantage of I come from game design. I was a big Magic player. We've got a lot of experienced Overpower players. We've all had the benefit of 20 years of game design theory to know like things that we know you can't play a card that doesn't affect the game and you lose card advantage. Whereas, back in 95, there was only a handful of these games out and people were still trying to like, is information important? We haven't played enough games yet to really know that for sure.
Do you ever do Magic has draft tournaments. You can't really do it because you have to have cards that go with the actual character, but you could draft heroes and then let characters build decks around the heroes they draft, and that would force people to, kind of break out of their mold and have to build decks around characters that they don't normally use.
Well, it's
Theo, that's a
interesting you
great
should
one.
mention that, Theo. So what we've done, one of the big things we've talked about and that we're pushing is we're working with Cardamundi, who's Prince Magic and Pokemon. What they've been able to do is we've innovated a coalition model where when you open a pack of Overpower now, you get 17 cards, all playable. There's no land, there's no advertisement. You get what we call character stacks. So you get your hero and you get 5 of their special cards, 1 copy each. And that's 6 of the commons. Then you get a second hero and their 5 specials, and those are randomly in each pack. So every pack you're going to get a hero, 2 heroes, and 5 specials each for the heroes. And then you have 4 uncommons, which is most characters have a 6th card. So their best 1 per deck are randomly in other packs. And then the other thing we've done to make the collecting really good for kids. I'm sorry for the audience if you've heard me say this a million times, but I'll pitch it again. All of our rarity is alternative art. So we've hired all these huge Marvel and DC artists like Jay Lee did a piece for the first set. Jim Chung from Avengers X-Men and the Infinity Thanos run did cards. Philip Tan did some beautiful art. We've got some great artists from Joe Prado Studios. That's all your alternative character cards. You can get different art on them, and it doesn't say the words, so you get the full piece. But we did that intentionally so you can do draft and sealed. So we do like a Rochester draft, if you're familiar with that, where you'll see your uncommons. Everybody will put their 2 character stacks in the center, and then you'll pick which characters you want to build based on your uncommons.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's the intention of the game, is that it's fully draftable from the beginning.
That's good, because then you're going to get people playing all the different heroes at some point, you know.
Yeah,
Well,
and
I-
I just go ahead.
Just to build on that, I would also recommend going forward as you add more IP, and you've done such a beautiful job with it, to maybe get back a little bit to what our thinking was originally, using Jubilee again as an example, like how, if that's somebody's favorite character, how to make them playable. So not so much about, the draft is one way, that'll make sense. That sort of forces you to use somebody who might not be so powerful, but because there's something great about everybody. There's
Yeah,
something that
totally.
you fall in love with about all these characters. So if you can just figure out what that is, and you can create specials around that, entice them to use lesser characters however you can.
And that's a big part of, I always give the analogy, like when we're in design meetings or when I've talked to people, it's sort of the theme of the Avengers movie. Like Black Widow is probably physically the weakest, or the second, her and Hawkeye are both regular humans, but she's the one that figures out how to use the scepter to stop the Tesseract. She actually ends up being the most important one. And that's kind of how we try to design now with characters, ways that they can interact with the mission cards. Or it's not necessarily, some of the characters like John Carter, he's pretty vanilla combat back and forth, like he's a pulp swashbuckler. Whereas a character like Deja Thoris is in the game, she has some more meta effects, but they're very good. So that's definitely one of the theories we have.
I mean, just to get you back to where the origins of Overpower, like even before we started, I was thinking about how to do this exact thing, going back to that role playing experience at West End Games, working on the Torg multi-genre game. We had discussions like, okay, here's a fight. It's between James Bond and Darth Vader. How do we make this last? One guy's got force powers and a lightsaber. How is this going to work? But James Bond is just as cool as Darth Vader. So what is it about him that's really cool? Really think about it. And we came up with a stat for him called luck, where Blofeld's Spectre guards always are spraying machine guns at him, and they can't hit him because he's lucky. In addition to all the other great attributes that he had, but we added that little thing, that little mechanic, so that then when we put him in a fight with Darth Vader, he was doing a lot better because that added to just who he is and what he does. So it's thinking outside the box a little bit, like thinking about these characters and what makes them great and what people love about them, and then how to manifest that.
That's great. That's great. Keith and Sean, what any questions for these guys? I don't want to put you right on the spot, but I also tend to talk the whole time too. I go on
I
and
can't
on.
think of anything. I've just been really enjoying hearing the history of the game. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Actually, a question I'll have for you, Michael. When you came up with the game, did you originally consider it as a superhero game, or was it something that you thought, either sci-fi or horror, or different, or any specific genre?
Oh, no, we specifically were thinking, so the credit to all of you guys. So we were thinking in our minds, it's how to simulate Marvel combat. That is exactly what it was. All
That's
the
the
things
license
you
we
love
were
about,
develop- That's the license
how-
we were designing to.
we were designing to that license. So it's like we were handed this, and in my mind, it's like I'm a huge comic book nerd, so I want to add all these things. I want teams to work together. That's a big Marvel thing. Team ups. We wanted that city feel. So we built all that stuff into it. Credit to where the game went. It now works across so many genres, and I think it's amazing what's happened with it. It's a real credit to not just what we created, but everything that evolved out of it, everything that Fleer did with it, everything that your team has done with it since. I think it'll continue to evolve and it's a nice baseline. Wasn't really what we were aiming for, but it turns out to be a nice baseline for cutting across any genre.
So,
Thank you.
Sean,
Yes.
Anything? Any
No,
questions?
I'm just happy to listen as a fanboy. I'm just sucking in all the history. It's
So
great.
I've got a question that popped into my head then. So at the point where you guys made this, I this came out in 95, so you guys were designing, I assume, in 94. Magic's only been out for maybe 25, 26 months. So it's still new, it's still hot. The few other games that are on the market are all clones with as far as the resource management mechanic. So you're playing lands, you're building up slowly. You draw your initial hand, you're drawing a card every turn unless you have effects. Was there, when you looked at this originally and said CCG, like I'm going to make a collectible card game, did you say specifically, like, I want to do something completely different than these resource management games? Or did you already kind of have an idea and you're like, I bet this could work for cards? I'm just curious because that's still a thing you see nowadays. One of the reasons Overpower, I think, is so beloved is because it's so, you play battles, you play in hands. It's so different than 98% of the resource management games.
So, taking taking venturing out of the picture, right? When we first started talking about how to do it, we knew that Magic had the tapping mechanic. We didn't want a tapping mechanic, right? So we started thinking about, okay, how are we going to do this? And we kind of came up with the concept of the actual power cards that play through the hero and the fact that you couldn't have duplicates. That was how you were going to limit not just filling your hand with, all 6 power cards, right? That's just something we brainstormed and came up with, and then when we started playtesting it, it kind of worked out well.
Yeah, in fact, I'll say it was an advantage. I think the fact that neither of us was a huge Magic player. So we were coming at this from we were coming at it from role playing. So that's really where it comes from. Like, oh, I'm going to play this character, Captain America. What are his attributes? Let's break that down. So I think role playing kind of was the start of what Overpower became. Really didn't have anything to do with Magic. We were
In
just
fact,
approaching it.
Overpower is what made me go out and buy Magic cards so I could see what this collectible card game thing was all about when we were first designing. So I went out and bought some Magic cards, and my girlfriend played, and she taught me how to play. And I'm like, okay, this is cool. I have a ton of Magic cards now that I don't play anymore because I got tired of sorting them. Um, but we did want to do something, kind of completely different. And there was no venturing, but the battle was, to knock out your opponent's heroes. So we basically had, you still can win that way in the new Overpower. That was the only way you won in the initial game we designed. There were no mission cards. It's a cool concept. I probably would have gone a slightly different direction with it. And sounds like you guys are now, which is cool. But and actually, just a little more history. So that mechanic came from a different set of game designers.
Which one? The venturing?
Venturing?
Yes. So unbeknownst to us, while we were developing Overpower, and we were back and forth with Fleer for 9 months. That's how many, I don't remember how many times we went into their office to play test some rule changes, went back to the drawing board, went into their office. It was 9 months of back and forth and back and forth. And unbeknownst to us, Bill was really in love with this venturing concept. And there was another gaming company that he hired, and he hated from what I heard, they didn't like their whole game. The only thing they liked was the venturing mechanic that Bill told them to come up with. So they bought the venturing mechanic from them and the game from us and married them together.
That's super interesting. Yeah, it's I feel like when we played as kids and ventured for the first time, that's not surprising because it sort of felt that way. It felt like this kind of different thing. And I think, I think a lot of kids didn't love it at first. I will say that my friends and I, we tried it and we were like, I just want to like throw the big attacks and kill the other characters. And I have definitely heard other people, but I think what's interesting is that ends up, I feel like the more you kind of get into the game, that ends up being the beauty of the game is this ability to concede the battle and win in a way that doesn't involve having to kill the characters. It really sort of becomes kind of it becomes a thing about it that's so like nuanced and so unique.
I
Yeah,
like
Even
I like
elegant, I would say.
elegant.
I,
Thank you, Keith. That's the word I was trying to say.
I like the venturing part of it. The part that originally I didn't love was the fact that the venture cards had different values and you could bluff somebody by putting up just to try and get them to surrender. And to me, that wasn't very superhero-y, right? Like I'm going to put up a high value venture card, that's what I did to Gabe in front of everybody, make my opponent think that I have a really good hand. And then he surrendered and I had junk.
Love it.
Yeah, which was great. I felt great that I, bluffed him. I'm a poker player too, but to me, that's not very superhero-y. I wouldn't mind. I would like it better if it was just a certain number of venture cards to win, or a certain number of or the knockout, and all the venture cards were the same. So it kind of would take the bluffing aspect out of it, where you would just say, I'm gonna retreat. I would probably call it retreating, and just I'm gonna retreat this battle, and you get the venture card, and not have it be have this whole kind of bluffing mechanic. It does add a very cool strategic nuance to the game. I just don't think it fits the I don't think it fits the genre very well.
Well, interestingly enough, and I swear we didn't tell you guys to cue this up, but Keith, why don't you tell Theo a quick little description of Skirmish?
Sure. It was this is a version of the game that I came up with called Skirmish Mode, where you decide ahead of time how many different missions you're going to fight over, be it 3, 5, 7, or even 9. And then you play individual hands. And then instead of venturing, it's just almost like a skins game in golf, where hand one, you play for, you're fighting over that mission. And whoever scores more damage than the other person wins that mission. Then you go to
Well,
hand two and you're playing just for that mission, and you do that till you've played and somebody gets the majority of them.
and to me, that fits the property much better.
And that's an
I
official
like,
format
yeah,
that's it's in
I-
our rule books. It was in our Learn to
Yeah.
Play rule book we launched with. I think you'll see there's definitely going to be purists, I think, at first that stick to venture. But one of our play groups was almost primarily a skirmish one. They loved it. And I think you'll see a lot of like, we're really pushing this with our player network portal we're launching and what we're putting behind it. Really hoping this becomes a game that you see played at Friday night at stores or one night a week. And for those games when you don't have as much time, I think you'll see a lot more people playing skirmish mode for those kind of Friday night overpower type play. Whereas the venture stuff will probably be for bigger events and yeah, and it's we just want to make sure. I think one of the things we definitely want to do is bringing Overpower back really required us to be hyper focused on tournament competitive play. Stores want to see that exists. There's a lot of reasons that I'm not going to go into to push that, but simultaneously, it's very important to us that there's casual play too. This was a game that so many people that loved it and played it weren't hyper competitive tournament players. And some of the best memories I have of Overpower is, Sean here. Just I don't know if you guys have watched our other town halls, but Sean's been one of my best friends since 7th grade. I was in 7th grade. I think he was a little younger. We met because I used to go to the one card shop in town that sold Overpower, and I would see packs gone that I know my friends and I didn't buy. And I was like, there's someone else in this town that plays. And then finally I was going through the lunchroom and I saw Sean and one of his buddies had cards out. And that's actually how we became friends, was because you guys invented this game, and we've been friends for over 30 years.
You were the first Overpower stalker. I like it.
Yeah.
It's funny, like talking about the venture thing, just to go back to when we first heard it was happening and everything, because it was hammered home to us so clearly. This is for kids. Simplify, simplify. So we spent, a lot of time doing that. And all of a sudden we turn around and, well, no, let's have kids play poker. We'll introduce them to the world of gambling at a young age. That's something that, the contradiction of that was like, what is
I,
going on here exactly? So it's not that I think, hated the mechanic and didn't love it as a game. It was just more like, that wasn't what we understood the mission was. And like Theo said, it didn't feel very much like Marvel Comics. So that was why we were a little bit of a head scratcher. But we come to understand that that's part of what makes it really unique, and
yeah,
and what people love about it. So definitely, and I'm glad that you're thinking of ways to use it beyond its original. And Keith, I love what you just we're talking about. I think that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Steve and Ron were great to work with. Bill was difficult. I'll say that for us anyway. He was very opinionated. Um, he was an executive. He didn't really have any game design background, but he was one of those executives, from my perception, that came across as he knew better than us. Whereas, Steve had a ton of Magic the Gathering background. Ron was an artist. They were fun guys to work with. I had a lot of fun traveling with them that first year to the different conventions, as well as Kathy Probe and
Yeah, Kathy.
yeah, she was a lot of fun. So we had a good time. I'll tell you a story, a funny
Sounds great.
story. We're at Gen Con, uh, and Steve would probably remember this. We're at Gen Con, and we went out after the day tournament and everything. We all went out to a German restaurant together for dinner. We're all sitting around the table, and uh, why am I blanking on his name? Luke Skywalker.
Mark Hamill.
Okay.
Mark Hamill comes in because he was promoting, um, I think, a video game that he did voiceover for. And he was at Gen Con as making appearances. And he came in and they brought him into his own private room in this German restaurant. So he sits down, they seat Mark Hamill down. We're all like, holy crap, that's Mark Hamill, right? We're sitting there having dinner. Chief Domzowski yells out, "Use the fork, Luke!"
That's pretty good. That might
Mark
be
Ham-
one I feel like he might not have heard before.
Yeah.
One of the people sitting with Mark got up and closed the door.
That's great.
Yeah, true story.
So I've got a question from something that you said. So you said 6 power cards. Were there was that the range the stats could go up to originally? Did it stop at 6?
No, we had sevens. We had
7s.
sevens. Yeah.
So
You
8s,
wanna
it
see-
went up to 8 later on.
No, you're right. No, we had eights. I see Spider-Man had an 8 defense hand to hand.
Okay.
Yeah. Captain America had an 8 defense. So the first power players, the A deck had Iron Man, Spider-Man, Punisher, Daredevil, Captain America, and the Hulk.
So was it more than 4 characters too?
Yeah, because you had reserves.
Okay.
You put 4 up, and then you had 2 that would come in when the first 2 got knocked out.
Oh,
Team.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's
And
very
was
cool.
and, of course, at the time, X-Men was really big.
And
So
then
X-Men was the other deck because that
yeah,
was,
and it had Wolverine, Colossus. So this is a short deck. It had Storm. It had
it had Cyclops.
Cyclops. It did not have Professor X. Wow, this
But it was
card
just
from this deck.
Well,
it was at
yeah,
a
you
time
guys
when-
go ahead,
No, go
Michael.
ahead.
I was going
It
to
was-
say, I
it-
think we're going to say the same thing. It was right on the heels of the X-Men cartoon on Fox.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
the Spider-Man
Jubilee-
cartoon too.
Jubilee, Storm, Sabretooth, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Colossus. So
Well-
the first tournament were these.
So that was it like a playtest tournament at that point? Because the game,
Yeah,
Yeah.
not the one where they gave away $5,000. That was after the actual version that had the venturing came out. But there was a tournament before that where we kind of play tested these out, taught people to do them. What's interesting too is some of these specials were specific to the fact that there was movement and range. Like there was like Hulk had a special that let him throw something up to a 7 range at somebody. So like if somebody was flying, he had a special that he could like pick up a bus and throw it at them in the sky.
very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so interesting. The kind of, I guess with games, there's going to always be some similar ideas from things we've seen in the comics, but we've talked about possibly having like instead of every single card that can attack. The modern game now is 3 frontline characters, 1 reserve.
Yeah.
And there's cards that can attack the reserve. We've toyed with the idea of maybe making different ranges that can like skip rows or doing things like that. That won't be in any of the at least the first 3 sets that we've done. But that's also what gets us so excited too, is we're really looking at these first 3 sets as kind of one big set released slowly, where it's going to be a lot of cool new card ideas, a lot of cool ways to make mechanics that maybe didn't seem as good really powerful. It's going to feel like really, overpower, where the same theory you have, we're not making, unlike what Ron said with trading cards, they wanted to make you have to kind of chase a lot of packs to get the stuff that were really good cards. We're really focused on the gameplay. So we want every character to be playable in some way. We want characters to bring their own sort of more unique strategies and less genericized cards over different characters. And so, yeah, it's so interesting to hear, because I feel like we're all kind of gravitating toward the same ideas. Like, this is what we want to see the superheroes do, which is very cool. We've had you guys on for about an hour, so I think this is a good time. Letty, if you're able to jump up here on stage. Letty is one of our amazing staff over here at Lazarus Rising Games. She usually cultivates the questions for us. She does all those great little graphics when we intro everybody on stage. Letty, are you with us?
Yeah, can you guys hear me all right?
Yes, we
I
can.
can.
Okay.
Letty, how are we doing with
Okay, that's
questions?
good. Yeah, we have a few questions. 5 questions from what I gathered from Facebook and YouTube and Discord. Yeah, so let's get right to it. The first one came from Discord. It asks, we see many levels of playtest cards before the first set of 3 sets. At what level did you stop testing?
It's a good
Really
question.
great question.
And see if I can remember, because it was almost 40 years ago.
Yeah, I don't ever remember stopping.
Yeah.
Felt like it kept going.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's how we feel. We definitely play tested right up till the printer was like, you can't make any more changes.
Yeah, and, at the point, so it was, like I said, it was a 9-month process, and then at some point, when they were, like, I guess, merging the venture cards in, we went through a short period of, seemed like a long period to us, but it probably wasn't that long, where we didn't hear anything from Fleer, and we were starting to get nervous. And then all of a sudden they called us in, and they had this game that kind of merged the games, and they had us play it with them. And then we were play testing the new game with them, but we weren't really doing a lot of development at that point. Just kind of playing it, because very shortly after that it came out. So we didn't have a lot of involvement in playtesting once the venturing came in. So I'd say right up to about that. And then, Steve and Ron playtested all the sets that came out when they developed, new sets. They employed me right up to the point where they came out, right when they started to develop the first expansion, and they did not hire us for the expansions. At that point, we probably were too expensive for them. They didn't need us anymore.
How many people, I can't remember if we asked Ron this or not, but how many people were playtesting it in the early stages?
So my brother and I, Ron, Steve, Keith, I don't remember you in the early stages.
No, I didn't come in until after
But
that.
also Kathy Probe played with us. Bill Jamis sometimes played, not every time. Most of the time it was Mike and I, Ron, Steve, Kathy, and that was about it, that were doing most of the play testing.
Very cool. All right,
Yeah.
Letty, what else do we got?
So this one came in right at the beginning of the chat tonight, and it asks, is the power type brute force in LRG's OverPower inspired by the brute force stat in the Stern Brothers Power Players?
I would like to say it was. Um,
I
I'll
mean,
be
we had
honest,
brute
probably
force.
what happened is because the power cards that Theo just showed are definitely ones that Kefers have donated for prizes. I know people have collected those. I have one of those somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, who knows? I don't remember. We went through when we decided to change a couple of the stats, we had several different ideas, and brute force was put on the table. Even at this point, it's been 2 years. I don't remember who
We
Yeah.
put which ones
we
up.
we
I don't
had it
either.
in power players. We had brute force, we had weapon, and we had hand to hand. Were the three different um, fighting categories we had.
Yeah, so we've changed fighting to combat and strength to brute force. And I know for us, the what made us settle on brute force, and again, you guys have heard me, I'm a broken record here. One of the main reasons we wanted to go with that specific name was a lot of the later overpower would represent groups of people as a single character card. So you had like the Morlocks, or you had the Marauders, or you had the Reavers. And sometimes I think it made sense. Sometimes there were characters I wished I would have seen alone, but there's definitely going to be characters that you want to see that way, like Commissioner Gordon in the Gotham PD, or Shield, or and brute force. We've got a character in the first set that's a great example, which is we've got Robin Hood. We wanted the Sheriff of Nottingham. The Sheriff of Nottingham on his own, not really, I think, as big of a threat. So we're really representing him as having the entire army of Nottingham behind him. That's one of his specials, is I have an army. And that allowed us to give him a higher brute force stat, because the idea is like, yeah, Hulk can take on an army of regular humans, but if you have an army of, 100,000 humans, Hulk's going to be over here beating up a bunch of them, and the rest of them are going to go sack a city. And that was sort of our rationale for changing it to the brute force stat. So,
Makes sense.
yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, so that's what we had originally. I actually think the original game, the 3-stack game, and then they added Mind. I think that was a good add.
For sure.
They should have thought of it in the beginning, right? We had like combat. You didn't always have the same combat stat. Daredevil had weapon Billy Club, whereas Cyclops had I beams was his combat stat, and then there would be a little symbol next to it if it was ranged.
Okay.
It's
And
a
was there like a
particular
number for the range? Like you had said originally, like Colossus could throw something as 7. Was that
um,
like the distance, or was it just either ranged or ground?
uh, yeah, usually we did want to keep it somewhat simple. So if you had range, you could range attack anybody anywhere if you
Okay.
had a ranged attack, right? But some characters like Hulk needed to use an object or his special to make a ranged attack. He couldn't just make a ranged attack, right? He could
I
use a
see.
special would
Okay, that's
allow.
very cool. I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
If you had one built in, then
yeah.
that was different. Then you got it. Yeah.
Yeah, he could pick up something and throw it, or he had like a jump special, so he could jump in the sky and
Yeah.
attack somebody, or jump up onto a building. He had a climb and a jump, so he could climb a building if somebody was on a building. But if somebody was flying in the sky, he couldn't attack them unless he threw something at them or jumped.
That's very
So
cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that kind of made a lot of sense. It was a lot of fun. I will say that the one thing that we caught a lot of slack for was the storm special,
Which one?
emotional outburst.
Oh.
Inquest literally called it the PMS card.
Oh,
And
wow.
they gave us a lot of slack for it, and really was her thing, right? Like
Yeah, that wasn't what we were. Yeah, we
that's
weren't
not what we
trying.
were going for at all. It was, she would rage out and storm would happen, right? So that's what we were going for. But we didn't really think of the ramifications of that
Yeah,
name, but then
the
neither
word,
did Fleer.
unfortunate choice of words, but yes, I mean the specials. I think that's where the characters' personalities came out. Where you really felt like you were playing them, and that's
Yeah.
that was what we were really focused on. How to get again getting back to the origins of this game, which is more role playing than it was collectible card at the beginning.
And I think that's we start for sure with I mean, I know we have a little bit of a unique process. We've talked about it a little bit in other town halls, but we tend to start with the editorial. It's really important to us that, like, if you sit down and you choose a character, it isn't just fun, it doesn't have a good mechanic, but you walk away being like, I felt like I got the experience of controlling that character on a team. That's super important to us. So,
I have
all
another
right, Letty,
idea
you
for you.
said I know you said you had a few more. What do we got next?
So over at YouTube, Phil Keffer mentioned that most of the play card tests that have been donated over the years came from Theo. And he's wondering, does Michael still have any of his playtest cards?
I do. In fact, yes, I still have an entire box of regular Overpower.
Wow.
In here, yes, I still have I have the old Deck A and Deck B with the old Power Player logos on them.
Nice.
And I have a lot of loose decks as well that with the little folding. But somewhere, I don't know if you have this, Theo, or I do. We have the index card version of Overpower that
I
we.
don't have them anymore.
Yeah, I think
My-
I've got them somewhere. I'd have to really
Wow.
look. But
Yeah,
the
my girlfriend.
actual original, before we got official art from Fleer, before they helped us,
Yeah,
we play tested and developed this thing just between ourselves. I have a bunch of things. I have a
Tim
lot of the
wrote a
great
ton of index
Savior,
cards for us. I
too. I have
remember
a
that,
lot of
my girlfriend. I also,
really
I
great.
know if you guys have seen, like, there's a comic of Thing explaining how to play Overpower. Michael wrote that.
Oh, that's great.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I have some we have the articles about us in Dragon magazine and in Gamer and all sorts of
Yeah,
things.
I
And
have
these
a bunch
wonderful
of them.
Fleer was great. They did these wonderful promo kits that I
Oh,
have just
very
welcoming
cool.
people to Fleer to Overpower and what it's all about. And a lot of there's posters in here,
Yeah, I
full
have
sized, that are
Yeah,
still in here.
Yeah.
Amazing stuff that they still. I guess they would give this to card shops and things like that as their promo materials. Wouldn't doubt it if they had some standees. That wouldn't surprise me.
And I do
Because
have copies of the original
Mhm.
comic book that of Thing explaining how to play that Mike wrote.
that's very cool.
Mike, I
Yeah,
don't
there's
know
a
if
lot.
you
They
have
were great. Fleer was great when it came to promotion, and they had great marketing people. They had all these flyers that they would hand out.
So that was a
Yeah.
question I had too. So obviously in the new one, the yellow goes across the top to describe the cards, but even in the advertisements, it was still just up one side.
That's right.
So was that something where, like, the specials got the tech stuff added later, or was it just that's how they wanted it to look in the advertisement?
I don't remember.
That's a really great question. I seem to remember decks looking like that, so I want to say that the original ones looked like that, but I could be wrong. I mean, they were phenomenal at this. This was totally their
Yeah.
Fleer's purview of like how to design these cards,
Like
how to
here's
create the
an
marketing material.
invisible woman.
Okay, so yeah, I see it. That looks pretty similar. It's
No
cool
art.
though seeing like the initial design.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no art. I had so many. So if you guys ever do a tournament at a convention in Orlando, I would try and come. And if that happens, I'll bring the whole set and I'll bring some
Mhm.
playtest decks and
Very cool.
uh,
Well, we
you
just
know,
might have I don't think we've decided on Valhalla yet, which is one of the that tournament circuit now has become the North American Overpower League. So that league still has they're going to be running their tournaments, which are going to be a legacy format. So the mix of the old and the new. Our regionals, which we've announced, we're going to do 4 regionals, and we've put up there's going to be 20K in purse for each regional, and then there's going to be a national at the end of the year. But I believe that one of the places Larry Van Etten is considering for Valhalla might be Florida. So that's the last one we've got to figure out a location for this year.
as long as the date works out for me, I would definitely try and come.
That'd be great. That'd be
I
awesome. We'd
was,
love
be
to
I
have you.
was gonna go to that comic convention and that didn't happen, but so yeah, be happy to do that.
Very cool. Letty, what else do we have from our audience extraordinaire?
This next one is, how will the new OverPower game come close to the original concept presented today by the Stern brothers?
So I'm gonna guess I think we covered a lot of that probably after that question was put in there, but I think it's interesting the amount of crossover that we've seen from lower value teamwork cards, from objects having a little bit more functionality so that it feels a little more like what a different object would do. The as much as basic universe cards are a classic part of the game, they're not very flavorful from the editorial. A hand grenade is +2 to an attack, whereas a crossbow is a +3. Um, so not as well editorialized and really unique. So I think that's where I've seen a lot of the crossover, and I think that's one of the great things about this community. One of the reasons we love doing this. We were players in this community for the last 10 years, and you're really getting a game where we've sort of heard something similar from both the Stearns and from Ron and Steve. There was kind of the corporate people above that were thinking about things from a trading card company business standpoint. We're running an entire company with the purpose of creating the best user experience for playing a game that we love. So I think what you're going to see is very meticulously designed and meticulously tested mechanics, but mechanics that we think are cool that we've seen in a comic book. Like everybody wants to see Thing hit somebody with a lamppost, right? I think we can all agree. Like no one doesn't want to see that. Like that's great. Everybody wants to feel like if you're using a character like Moriarty, that you're scheming and you're finishing some kind of a really intricate criminal mastermind plan. I think that we're doing a very good job at creating that experience. And the feedback that we had over 10 playtest groups. I don't know what, Keith, 60, 70 playtesters?
Yeah, close to
Something.
that.
We had a lot between all our groups, and pretty universal feedback that, I think Al Spader said it the best when he got the cards. They did their first playtest weekend, and I just got a text from him that said, lightning in a bottle. You guys have really done this. And that was where I felt like, okay, good. It's not just us thinking we did it. Like the people we're getting it out to that love OverPower are having the same feeling. So, yeah. So I think that answers the question.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
also,
let me
I
give
was
you
calling them
a.
object cards. They were actually
Oh.
environment cards,
Right.
just to be clear.
Oh, very cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then there was universe cards in the playtest sets. Those were more like weapons. The
Yep.
environment cards were more like things that would be on the city street that the heroes would interact with.
I like that. That's very cool. Michael, you were going to say something.
Well, I just along this, idea of what this question was about. I think you were already doing this because I can tell by the way you're, the sort of loving way you're treating the properties that you're moving into this, whether it be John Carter or Robin Hood or whatever. And I developing things in Hollywood. I always take the sort of physician's oath. First, do no harm. So when you're taking an IP and you're developing it for television, movies, for games, whatever you're doing it for, most people say, well, what do I have to change in order to make this into a TV show? Or, I think you got to ask the opposite question, which is, what is awesome about this that people love that we absolutely have to make sure is in the game? And that's, if you start with that premise, whatever your new IP is, what is great about this IP that people love? How do we get it in there and make sure it's in there, whether it's a game or not? That's, you can't go wrong if you keep true to that North Star.
Mike
I
keeps
love that.
mentioning Hollywood. Michael's the executive producer of the Warner Brothers show Bat Wheels.
Okay. That's
Wow.
awesome.
Yeah, and it's, of course, Hollywood is the same as working with a company like Fleer. There's a lot of people that are going to give you notes, and they're going to, but ultimately, everyone wants the same thing. They all want to see something that's great, and they all want to, have something be successful. I love that your team, are fans. That this is fans who are doing this, and what you already know what you love. You know what the fans love because you are fans, and that gives you a huge advantage over, most of the things that I do and the people that I work with. It's like you just, you're going to go into it with that TLC. So I would just encourage you to always remember, what it is. Like I think back on John Carter, and I fell in love with those Edgar Rice Burroughs novels from an early age. And I know that, the things I would love to see, I'm sure that your version is just packed with them. I have total confidence in the new IP is going to be treated the same way.
Yeah, and I love one of the great things of working with Keith and Sean. Tyler was on the screen for a second. We didn't end up. You guys, I think, showed most of the cards Ty had that he was going to show. The great thing about working with this team is that they have that dedication. Even some of the volunteer designers we brought on, the Steven, Greg Costa. When we find out that we're going to have a new property or they're jumping on to design something, everybody's going back and reading all the comics. And, when we announced the Top Cow license, those guys went through and read every issue of Cyberforce, every issue of Strike Force. They got through, they were remembering things. I read them as a kid and then back in 07, and I was brushing up on everything Top Cow. But that's been what's great is just, I think everybody that's designing it loves these properties. They were our childhood stuff, and we not only want to do them justice and do their creators justice, but we also want to introduce them to people that love games that maybe don't know some of these characters, which has been great. So, characters like the Edgar Rice Burroughs guys have a character that they write now, Victory Harbin, who's in our game, who's somebody who was created by some of the newer writers who still write in that universe. And she's fantastic. I've read one of the books. It was great. And she's a really fun character, and we had a really fun time designing her to do those mechanics. But we ended up liking her enough that we put her on some of the binders and the deck boxes. And it's that kind of stuff where if I hadn't done this project, I probably wouldn't have found that book because I don't have as much time to read. I hope that other people see this and get interested and go read that book and follow these properties because there's so much great stuff out there. And same with me, I've told the story 100 times, but I got into Fantastic Four by buying Joe Jusko's 92 Marvel Masterpiece cards, and I liked the art on Human Torch so much. I was like, I got to go see what this is about. I don't know this book at all. So I just like that. I love the idea that this can be a vehicle to get people into things that we love, games we love, comics we love, but also just appreciating the art to bring it back to the art that we talked about, appreciating art for art's sake and seeing those stuff drawn by hand, stuff colored with an artist touch to it, especially with we've been very vocal about there's no AI in anything we do. We want to create a place for artists to come do their art, to make a good living doing art with us. It's very important to us. So
yes. I have a lot of incredibly talented artists that work for me. So always happy if you're looking, happy to recommend some.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely talk. That's awesome. All right, Letty, what else do we got?
This is the last one I collected, and we were talking about conventions and everything. I think people are anxious about having OverPower at conventions. And this question is, will OverPower have a booth at Gen Con this year?
So we touched on it a little bit. We definitely want to. Just to give you guys an idea, the wait list to get a booth at Gen Con is quoted to us as anywhere between 2 to 7 years. It's so big now. Now, I hope I'm not 51 when I can get a booth at Gen Con. But so I think with what we're doing, it'll happen. But this year, when we were starting to set it up, we were already past where they do start doing the applications, I think in like April for the following year. So it's really far out. I'd say it's very unlikely we'll have a presence this year. I would be surprised if with the IP we're out to announce, with the other IPs I think that we're going to be able to lock in, I'd be pretty surprised if we don't have a 2026 Gen Con presence.
And everyone, I didn't realize there was going to be math on this town hall because we're all sitting here calculating your age.
Yeah.
He's 48.
I'm getting there. I'm about to turn 45.
Youngins.
Yes. I don't even know. Oh, that's the Shadow King. Thanks, Shadow King, for jumping in with that.
Well, considering how long ago OverPower was created and we were in our 20s, you can do the calculation on us.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for that.
Well, so Letty, did you say that's the last question that we have?
Yes, guys, that's it.
I think that's a pretty good place, guys. We did about an hour and a half here. That was so fun. I've heard your name. I know I watched one of the videos that you guys did. I think it was over a year ago, on one of the CCG channels. It was great to meet you guys in person. We're not going to be strangers. We love Overpower. We love the community. Any way you guys want to be involved or whatever, we're game. We're very. I think one of the things we really try to do is make sure that we have a very positive community that's very supportive of each other. We want it to be a place where people kind of escape and can just have fun, but we also try to make sure players really have a voice and a lot of agency. We really do listen to people's advice and suggestions, and we just love talking to the fans and hearing the different ideas. And we remember being the people on the other side that are like, wow, it would just be so cool if this like one thing were in the game or this one mechanic worked this way. And we can't, obviously, we have our own vision. We can't do that, but we want people to have that agency. So if you guys are interested at any point in playing or just like you were saying, Theo, coming by a tournament, this was a blast. We'd love to chat with you again.
Absolutely.
Well,
We
we are
won't be
so
strangers either. I'm on your Discord channel and I follow your Facebook page. So
And I just want to say this one thing, just to everyone out there that's listening, and to you, we're really grateful that the people who are in charge of the legacy of this game, are approaching it with such love and thoughtfulness, and it means a lot to us to know that it's still alive out there, and that you all are having such a great time with it, and the fact that it's in the hands of the fans now is just the most perfect thing, and wish you the absolute best luck going forward with all your new IP. I know it's going to be great. If you're ever out in LA with any event, look me up.
Awesome. We'll do that. And I'm going to leave you guys with one last little spoiler. So I went down to the printer. So this is our back to our cards. So it's more in line with using the same back for every IP that we get. This is the officially off the Cardamundi rack. This is the first sheet of official Overpower cards that's been printed in 25 years. So you guys are getting to
Wow.
see it here.
Fantastic. Congrats.
Yeah. All right.
thanks for
So
the
with that
questions,
little
everyone.
reveal, we'll leave it at that. And thank you guys so much for being with us. That was
Yeah, thank
super
you both
fun.
very much.
Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.
Take care.
Ta-ta.